1, 2, 3. Welcome to She Rocked It. This is the place where ladies are talking about the ways we're blazing our trails and the things that put the wind in our sails. Hello and welcome to the She Rocked It podcast. I'm your host, Karen Gross, and I am so glad that you're here with us. If you love what we're up to here at She Rocked It, please don't forget to subscribe. You can leave us a comment. We love reading your comments. And if you love this episode or any of our other episodes, please go ahead and share with a friend, because we truly believe that when women listen to, learn from, and lift one another up, we can all rock it. And I am so excited to share this conversation with Grace Loh Prasad, the author of The Translator's Daughter, her debut memoir, which explores living between languages, navigating loss, and the search for belonging. It's a deeply personal and very touching memoir, which I highly recommend you check out. Her writing has also appeared in places like the New York Times. She has an amazing catalog as a writer, and I encourage you to visit her website to learn more. I interviewed Grace 1 month to the day after she released The Translator's Daughter. And by the way, I have to give a shout out to her husband, Anil, himself an incredible music journalist, for introducing us. And in this interview, Grace shares some incredible gems of wisdom, including how she makes time and space in her very busy life for her own writing practice. She talks about how she approaches her writing first for herself as an introspective exercise, as a way of getting to know herself, finding meaning in her own life, even before she thinks about sharing it or getting it published. She does, however, share some great tips about getting published if that's something you're interested in. Without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Grace and hear how she raises her voice and rocks it. Why don't you, Grace, just give us, from your perspective, kind of an overview of your work and your muse and what you're up to?
Sure. So I'm a Taiwanese American writer and editor based in Oakland, California. I mostly write essays and nonfiction, so some of those things that you've seen. And I just published my first book, as you mentioned, 1 month ago today, The Translator's Daughter. And it is a project that was a long, long time in the making.
Did I see in the intro that it was like 20 years that you spent kind of working on this memoir? Is that right?
It's 20 plus years, believe it or not.
Incredible. But I love that you stuck with it all that time. You didn't let it go.
No, I didn't. I mean, so the way I started was, I would say in the late 90s. That was when I started writing, and it was purely for myself. So I was, early in my adulthood, living on my own in San Francisco at the time. And my parents were in Taiwan. And so the backstory is that I was born in Taiwan, but I was only 2 years old when we left. And my family migrated a couple of times. So we first went to New Jersey when I was 2 years old. And then when I was 9, my dad got transferred to Hong Kong for his work, and our whole family moved there. And I actually attended an American school in Hong Kong. So all this time, my whole education has been in English. And so I've been back to Taiwan many, many times, but have, felt almost like a tourist there and like just a visitor, and didn't have my own strong sense of connection. And so that was that was the impetus for my writing. Was I thought, I need to know a little bit more about my background. And also at that time, I had a serious boyfriend, and it felt like we might get married. Like, spoiler, we didn't. But I was thinking about like what would I pass on to my children about my heritage and history. And it was at that point I realized I didn't know that much, and I thought I need to pay more attention. I need to talk to my parents more and kind of really experience it for myself, and not just as someone who is tagging along on these visits and just, like letting my parents do all the speaking for me, because my language abilities were kind of frozen in time at this like preschool level.
So interesting. I feel like your work just delves into that idea of finding oneself, especially in the midst of kind of being somewhat, for lack of a better phrase, lost in translation. You're in many different places. You're finding your own identity, your own language, your own sense of belonging when you have been jostled around a little bit through your upbringing. So why was it that kind of writing became the outlet for you versus were you a writer from a young age? Why did writing kind of become that outlet in the 90s, you said, to kind of ventilate or maybe find yourself?
I think it was something that was easily accessible to me. So I studied mass communications in college. So it's, kind of writing adjacent, but I was not thinking of myself as a creative writer, as
Hmm.
somebody who would write a book. I thought I was going to go into advertising or marketing or something like that way back in the day. But I enjoyed writing and felt like I was pretty good at it. So it was something that, again, was accessible to me. And it was just at first, it was like just getting my thoughts down. It was almost like a diary, and so it started with self exploration on the page. And that process has continued for me and is still true today, which is that I'm writing because I'm exploring a feeling or because I have this curiosity about a topic and I'm trying to unpack it and I'm trying to understand it for myself. So that's the thing is that I don't necessarily know what I'm writing until I get it down, and then I look back through it later and I think maybe there's something here, or here are some things that are repeated or that are starting to build towards a theme, and here's another sort of, it's sparking another kind of idea and another connection or metaphor I can bring in. So it all starts with exploration for me.
I love that. And I keep hearing the power of journaling. I've been hearing this theme recently a lot, just the power of journaling is such an important practice to root ourselves, to clarify where we are in our lives personally. And I love the idea of that, it kind of starting there for you and not like, I'm setting out to write a memoir, to write the great American novel, to write, like, is that correct? Like, did you kind of start out, like you said, more, I need this for myself. I need to get my thoughts down. It wasn't like, I'm going to spend, today working on my memoir necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't starting with a book in mind. And I also wasn't really writing from a place of, I want to be an author and I want to have a book and I want to enjoy the trappings of kind of this literary life. So it was initially just private for me. And then when I started to become more serious about my writing in around 2001, so I actually made a commitment to, and I enrolled in a Master of Fine Arts program to study creative writing. And so that was a 2-year immersion. That was at Mills College in Oakland. And so, then I was studying the craft of writing. I was reading a lot, and then, of course, in an MFA program, you're reading your classmates' writing and providing feedback. And so, you're sort of learning and developing, and it's just this very focused and intense time. And so that was maybe when I first started to think, maybe I'm turning this into something. Maybe there's like a piece of it that could be published. Like I was still thinking kind of small because a book is a big thing, and a book is hard to write. It's like 200 to 300 pages of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In my natural form, that's the thing is like at heart, I'm an essayist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sort of my natural resting place for a piece is like 3 to 4 thousand words.
I love that. And I just want to ask you about the MFA because I feel like I talk to women sometimes who would dream about getting an MFA in creative writing, but there might be that I don't have time. Maybe it's not practical. I'm going to invest in my create. Why would I spend money on my own creativity? We have these stories that block us from doing, like, what was that point for you where like, I'm going to take this seriously enough that I'm going to invest in an MFA for myself and dive deeper into my own creative calling?
I think what sort of convinced me that I should do this, I was spending more time writing. I was getting serious about it. And I was freelancing, so my work at that time, I wasn't sort of tied to one company. I was working with lots of different clients. And so I had flexibility. That's also what allowed me to travel back and forth and visit Taiwan a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think because writing takes so much time, it takes up a lot of space in your life. So I was also single at the time. And I could do things like go to writing residencies. So
Mm-hmm.
2001, I also did 2 wonderful writing residencies. I highly recommend it. And my advice to women who are younger and who are starting on this path is be selfish while you can before you have those commitments, before you, if possible, have a family, a husband or like a really demanding job. Um, I had built my life in such a way that I had a lot of flexibility and independence. And so the decision to get the MFA for me was partly, it was a way for me to be seriously invested in something and to also be able to focus on working less. It was to make writing and my personal writing the major part of my life, and of course, there are financial considerations. So I was lucky enough to get financial aid and like a partial scholarship. Um, for the first year and then a little bit less the second year. So I did have financial support to do this study. But I think enrolling in a program, for me, it also was like, it means I'm going to grad school. And so when people ask what you do, you're not saying, oh, like, I do some writing here and there. It moves it from being like just this kind of like side hustle thing that you do, like this little hobby,
Right.
into something that's serious. So when you're in school for it, I feel like that makes it okay to not be working full time.
Right.
Right. So
Versus just like working on my novel at home and, yeah, kind of figuring it out.
exactly, exactly. It created the space in my life to focus on it. And it was also, it was like my calling card. It's like, this is what I'm doing now. And so it started to become part of my identity.
Hey, rock stars. Isn't this an amazing conversation with Grace? And there is more wisdom to come, so stay tuned. But I just wanted to jump in and say a big thank you to Bonnie Chalkin for her generous support of the She Rocked It podcast over on Ko-fi. I also have to add that Bonnie just released her own amazing memoir. It's called Roam With Me, Finding the Extraordinary in the Ordinary. And let me tell you, it is a beautiful memoir filled with insight and poignant stories pulled from Bonnie's own amazing journey. I've had the blessing of knowing Bonnie for many, many years. And let me tell you that her collection of essays really reflects her intuition, her wisdom, and the joy that she shares with the world every day. Congratulations to Bonnie on the release of her debut memoir. And if you want to support the She Rocked It podcast, you can do so on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/She Rocked It. We so appreciate your support. Now, let's get back to Grace. Amazing. And tell us a little bit, give us a window into your sort of writing practice or your creative practice. Like, how do you keep the discipline to get those words out? Like, is there a certain time of day? Do you have a special corner in your house? It looks like, again, if you're on YouTube, you can see that Grace, it looks like you're in like a beautiful office with a bookshelf behind you. Is this the environment where you like to create? Tell us about your practice.
Sure. I wish I had some sort of like magic woo woo kind of like
Give it to us, please.
to share. I mean, books in the background, like that's just me. I've always grown up in like a house of like floor to ceiling bookshelves. So this is like one, you can see two shelves, and there's like probably eight more in the house.
Love it.
Yeah, so that's very normal to me. But I would say in terms of my process, I'm not someone who gets up at the crack of dawn to start writing. Like I'm not really a morning person. And I also don't write
Okay,
every.
thank you. Thank you for that. Hello, fellow night owl. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Trying to reorient my whole like biology or something, but
I
just it's
know.
not working. At 44, I guess I should just consider myself not a morning person.
Yeah, absolutely. Like our whole household, like not morning people, but we do it because we have to. And there's a lot of coffee, like just
Yes.
like nothing happens without it.
Cheers. Yes.
So I would say my writing mostly happens on the weekends, And so I think when I became much more committed to it, I realized and I made a choice that this means there's less time for socializing, there's less time for shopping and sightseeing and doing stuff, and so I'll often spend, a good chunk of a day, if not like a whole day, um, focused on my writing. And so I do some of it here. This is my home office, and I'm lucky that I have this space. But at the same time, I also find I really work well in cafes. And this started, I think, when I was in college at UC Berkeley, is like that's where I would go to study. For me, somehow it's like being in an environment with like a lot of ambient noise, like I don't know why that somehow works better for me than being somewhere that's totally quiet. Like, so some people are like library studiers, and I was a cafe studier.
I love
Um,
it.
and I always knew like which cafes had like the latest opening times. So the one that closed at 9 o'clock, I would go to like the one that closed at like midnight.
I totally relate to that. My speech writing days when I was living in New York City, I would go to New York, you can find a place that stays open at all hours. So I'd find these little diners and just be typing away. And it's better than being in your apartment by yourself a lot of times. So I totally
Exactly.
love that. I love that you gave yourself permission to just own that and be like, I'm going to work on my book in a slightly noisy cafe. And like, that's your thing. And that works for you. I love that.
I feel like for me, I'm actually less surrounded by distraction. And also because it's like I'm sitting in a cafe, like I'm taking up a seat and, there's people all around me. Like I'm going to feel stupid if I'm wasting time scrolling on my phone. Whereas like at home, there's all these other things I need to be doing that are calling to me. And so I would say, it's a combination of writing here and then writing outside. And then, of course, if you can afford the time and the time away, it's doing writing residencies. I do mini retreats for myself sometimes, where I'll just go to, like a very inexpensive hotel, someplace that's like maybe an hour away, so not too far, and it has to be in a city that has good amenities, but is otherwise kind of boring. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on stuff.
I
Like
love
if
it.
there's not too much going on, that's perfect. I want a few good restaurants and like I'm done. And then it's just about staying in the hotel and getting my stuff done. So isolation works for me, I have to say.
I love this. And I know that you're married now because I've met your wonderful husband, also a very talented writer, music journalist, Anil Prasad. And I know you're a mom, obviously, because I know your husband and you, and I've been reading your book, of course. So you're this mom of a teenage son. And so when these moments come up when you're like, I need to escape to this small town and, hide in a hotel for a couple of days, like, tell me about that conversation because I feel like sometimes women are hesitant to raise their voices for that kind of solitude, for that kind of creative focus. So like, and now that said, I know that your husband is also a creative, so you understand, there's an understanding there, but still, how does that conversation go when you need that time?
I think, we look at our schedules and we're always, like Anila is also going out all the time, so he is a music journalist. So that means he's going to gigs constantly. He's going to concerts. He
And
also,
shout out, by the way, to Anil for introducing me to Grace. That's a supportive partner right there. Yes, he is the connector, the matchmaker here. So thank you. You rock, Anil. You rock in many
yeah,
ways.
absolutely. So she and he rocked it. Um,
Yes, that's the best.
Yeah, and I mean, everything you're saying is true. It makes such a difference to have a supportive partner and also someone, I mean, not everyone's going to have this possibility, but it's ended up being really great for me that I am married to someone who's also creative. And of course, that was like, so those were some of the first things that we talked about, were like our interests and our passions. And he's introduced me to so much on the music side, and then he's also just been really supportive of my writing. But he knows fundamentally that to be a writer, you need a lot of alone time. Um, you need a lot of solitude, you need a lot of focus. And so I also know when he needs that, when he's got deadlines or he's focused on an interview or writing like a big piece. I often proofread his interviews for him. And
Nice.
it's great because I think that makes the negotiation easier because we're trading off all the time. That's kind of the reality, whether it's for one night over like, who's going to pick up our son, who's going to be home for dinner, and who's going to be out, So it's a constant negotiation. But I think I am lucky that he knows I sometimes need this solitude. And I don't do it that much, honestly. I would maybe do it like once or twice a year if I'm lucky. And sometimes, there will be long stretches, but also, he also travels for his writing and for the things he does. And so that's the thing. We support each other because I want him to have those opportunities. Like it's never occurred to me to say no if he wanted to take a trip because somebody offered him a great, like an incredible interview, or these were like once in a lifetime concerts. I want him to have that experience. And so I think it takes generosity, for both of us to see that this is what we need as creative people. And this is how we feel fulfilled.
That's awesome to hear, that you have that, openness to and respect. I would say mutual respect for one
Mhm.
another's right creative time and creative calling. To take that maybe a step further, if I may, your memoir goes personal, on your relationship with Anil and your family, and what kind of gave you the courage, and how did that go, honestly, in your relationship to put down some, kind of intense moments that the two of you shared, and how does that negotiation work when you're writing a memoir? I mean, you want to be real, right? You want to be honest, but sometimes you might reveal things that are personal for other folks in your family. So how did that conversation go for you?
It's important to get consent and to, have someone realize, know that you're writing about them. And so there's a couple different ways it goes. So most of the writing in my book, when I'm writing about other people, it's about my parents. And so, at various times in my life, they've read bits and pieces of this, but so much of it was written in the last, 5 to 10 years. So during that period, they were ill and they passed away. So there's a lot they haven't seen. But I think what's different about my memoir compared to, maybe a lot of other memoirs out there is that I'm not exposing a secret or, talking about people that treated me terribly in childhood or adulthood, or kind of recovering from like a traumatic experience in that way that implicates other people. I think in my book, I'm writing about difficult experiences and loss. So these are things that happen to me, and these are things that happen to us as a family. So Anil is by my side for all of these things. He's traveled to Taiwan with me many, many times. We've brought our son there many, many times. And so he's been as supportive as one can be, even while, having some challenging experiences in Taiwan, being a person of color and having dark skin. That's like there aren't that many people of color in Taiwan, and certainly not in my family. I would say that my family has embraced him in the way that they know how,
Mm.
but also it's like we don't have like deep conversations because I'm not speaking their language, and they mostly don't speak English, like other than my parents and like a couple of uncles and aunts. Um, So, yeah, I think because I'm writing from a place of love and demonstrating love for my family, and I'm also witnessing, I'm witnessing kind of the difficulty of my mom having Alzheimer's and my dad being her caregiver, and like how much work it takes to support someone who is very seriously ill, and also how helpless I felt. That's a lot of what this is about too, is just at the time that I was reconnecting with Taiwan, and feeling closer and exploring my identity, I was also slowly starting to lose my parents, even before they passed away, just due to these experiences, due to their illnesses and so forth. So my dad knew up until the end that I was writing this book. And one of the very last things I said to him before I said goodbye to him, I said, my book will be called The Translator's Daughter. And that's an homage to him because he's the translator.
So powerful. And as you're talking, I'm kind of reliving vignettes from the book, which are so evocative. There's so much richness in this story on many levels. So thank you for sharing. And I feel like women may have this sort of book inside of them. They have this story that they want to tell, these stories, and don't really even know where to start, and you have plumbed the depths really in so many ways of your own journey and your own experiences with such courage. and with such consistency, in your practice. So what would you say to a woman who has the novel, the memoir, the book, even just the journal or the essay? You're, like you said, you're an essayist as well. Where does she start? Where does she get that courage to like take that first step to share her journey?
I mean, I would say that, like you do have to have the courage to put the words down and do it just for yourself, or sometimes it can be actually a very powerful motivation to think about doing it for someone in your life that you love or for your child. But I think a lot of what happens with writers, and particularly women who are writing memoirs, is they're either told directly or there are all these kind of indirect signals that, well, like, what is so interesting about your life? Or, like, why is that important? Or, you're not famous. Like, who would want to read about this? And I would say, don't listen to that. But again, it's, my writing started almost as a conversation with myself, and so, as you said earlier, journaling is very powerful. And it can lead to epiphanies. It can lead to much better understanding. Do it for yourself and believing in it, and kind of leaning into that and knowing that your story is different. And if you do eventually, get a piece or a few pieces published or even a book published, I think the beauty of it, and anybody who has been, reading and writing for a long time knows that being transported through reading someone else's story can be very freeing, and it gives other people permission to tell their own story and to kind of understand themselves. And that's a great reason to do it as well.
There's so much that you just said that I'm like cheering over here. Yes. Yes. I love what you said about writing, even if it's kind of messy, because it all kind of feeds into something beautiful, right? I would say that probably translates to if you're a painter or a songwriter or whatever, you got to have those kind of just sloppy days where you're just throwing it down. Do you journal or write like on a daily basis? Do you commit to like a daily practice? Tell us, like, how does your life day to day look now, or as you were kind of finishing the book? Do you have a day job still? Like, did this become your full-time pursuit after your MFA? Like, what does the balance of your day look like?
So I do have a day job, a fairly demanding one. And so this started, I was talking about like the 2001 period when I kind of started dedicating myself to the MFA program and to writing a lot. But pretty soon after that, right after I graduated, actually, I married Anil. And then I got a corporate job, and I've been working in kind of like, pretty significant full-time jobs since then. And we both do. That's the thing, is that, that's kind of what it takes to sustain a household, in the part of the world in which we live. And so we do these jobs to support ourselves, to have a roof over our heads. And then, with the time we have left, that's when we, exercise our creative freedom, and do the writing and do the editing and, all of the things that lead to that. So the process is, I do most of my writing on weekends. I think at night, like on weeknights, I'm pretty tired actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing things that are writing adjacent. So I participate in writing communities. I'll go to literary readings. I'll be submitting my work, or I'll be like revising my, like working on my website or revising my bio. Or, I'm submitting to like a contest or like an open call for something. So there's lots of things that are related to writing that are not writing that are also happening.
Mm.
So I would say that's kind of the balance of my time. And so for this book to come together, I mean, I've been working on it for so long, but it was just literally piece by piece, and in fact, I have a lot of stuff that's not in the book. I have a 60,000 word file called Odds and Ends.
Ah, I love it.
I know. Yeah, it's like my junk drawer, but like don't throw anything away because you never know when it's going to be useful. And I have in fact had experiences where I was writing an essay and I was thinking about making a different connection. And I basically cut and pasted something that I had written long, long ago. And it was like lost in a file somewhere. And it just worked perfectly in the new essay that I was writing.
Amazing.
Just one of those moments where like the stars aligned and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this is perfect. This little fragment that I had somewhere else is
Wow.
going to work really well here. So yeah, it's like save all those drafts. And I even have like all these paper drafts, that I used to work on. And because you never know like where it's going to lead you. And also as a writer, I'm often revisiting the same topics from different angles. And that's one of the things that I think is unique about my book is that it's not just written in a singular voice, kind of, from beginning to end, with the narrator occupying a point in time, closer to the present, as well as different points in time in the past. I'm writing from all these different time periods.
Yeah.
I'm talking about my age at this point or my son's age. And so there's all these different markers. And I feel like that works because it's a time capsule, all
Yeah.
these different times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've been thinking about putting pen to paper with some memoir style writing. And part of my inspiration is that I don't want to forget. I realize as I get older that things are getting fuzzier. I'm, 44, as I said, and I'm terrified of like, I don't want to forget some of these things that I went through and the lives I've led. And I think as women, we live so many different lives in our lifetime. And does that ever occur to you as well that you just like want to like hold on to these things and just document them?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. A lot of it is about documenting, remembering things, not only experiences I had with my parents, but, with Anil and with my son, Devin, our son. Um, And I also very consciously chose, like, I wanted to have something that I could give him that would, my son, that would help him trace his lineage back and his ancestry and understand, like, what does it mean to be part Taiwanese? And so, in
Beautiful.
fact, the last chapter of the book is a letter to my son, and I'm telling him about places I want him to visit in Taiwan someday when I'm not here. When I can't take him there myself, he's gonna find his way back. But there's no kind of like set time frame for that. You know, he might have that curiosity, like in his college years, or it might be much later in life. And so I just wanted to have this record and say these are the places that are meaningful for our family.
Your book is put out by Mad Creek Books, an imprint of the Ohio State University Press. Any tips on connecting, how you connected with a publisher, or if people want to connect with publishers? How does that happen?
I would say it's like you pay attention to where your friends are publishing, or also other people that you follow in the writing community. So writers pay attention to other writers. And so you can look and see which literary magazines are publishing innovative work or work in your genre. Which places are publishing the writers that you love or the type of writing that you really gravitate towards. And so that's the thing is I would pay attention to that. So I'm published by a small press. So Mad Creek Books is an imprint of the Ohio State University Press, and they have many imprints. And this is actually part of a series called Machete, which is dedicated to innovative literary nonfiction. And they publish a lot of, memoirs by writers of color. And they're looking for people that are kind of breaking boundaries in some ways. And so this was a wonderful fit for me. But I also, a good friend of mine published her book with this publisher. So that was part of the equation. So it was word of mouth. It was kind of seeing where other people have published work that has some similarities or it's work that I respect and admire. I actually don't have an agent, and a lot of writers who are writing certain kinds of books, and books that people see a lot of potential in to be a bestseller or to maybe be adapted for like film or TV. they're going to have agents and they're going to be able to pursue deals with like the really big publishers. But not everyone has to have an agent. There are ways to submit your work directly to publishers. And so that's what I did. So in addition to knowing someone who published with them, I researched on their website to see when they were open for submissions. So it's doing a lot of research, paying attention to what other writers do, and then also understanding what the opportunities are for an unagented writer. I also submitted to a lot of competitions, and I got some placements. I was a finalist in a couple of places, and then just like publishing, on a regular basis, single essays here and there. I think that's also helped to bring attention to my work. And all of that counts. All of that matters. You build up your writing credits, and credibility and presence, and then people become more interested in what else you have and whether you have a book.
Such great advice. So many great tips there. Grace, this has been such a beautiful conversation. I am so moved by getting to talk to you and hear more about your creative journey and what brought you to this exciting moment. So we're all celebrating for you this incredible milestone of completing this book, getting into the world. And, we always like to end with our one tip to rock it. So if you want to leave us with just one good, juicy tip so we can rock it like you are, what's your one tip to rock it?
So my tip is actually a line from my book. So there's a chapter where I talk about the music of David Bowie. And he passed away in early 2016, a few months before my dad passed away. And so I was listening to his music on repeat during that whole time. And so those things are very intertwined for me. But one of the things that stood out about that moment in time in 2016 was that people were just amazed that David Bowie had a brand new album come out, like, a couple of days before he passed away, that he was making art right until the end. And I feel like there's such a lesson in that, if you have a story inside you, or if you're making art, if you're doing something, you have to get to it. Like, don't wait until it's too late. And so my advice to sort of rock it is make art, don't wait. You don't know how much time you have. And art is the way that we can live forever. Art is the way that we reach for immortality, whether it's through writing, through painting, through music, through architecture. Your art can outlive you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the She Rocked It podcast. The podcast is produced by Karen Gross, Tori Marchioni, and Aaron Phelan, with audio engineering by Tung Chen. The She Rocked It theme song is by Karen Gross and Tim Motzer. Thank you to everyone who shared their support of the She Rocked It podcast on Ko-fi. If you love what we're doing here, feel free to show your support at Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/She Rocked It. And of course, you can follow everything we're doing on the She Rocked It website, sherockedit.com, and on our Instagram page. Rock on.